The Vorthan Alliance had enjoyed peace for over 3 centuries. 6 different alien species worked together, sharing knowledge and trade across dozens of star systems. They built beautiful cities on garden worlds, created art that spanned multiple dimensions, and solved problems through careful discussion rather than violence. Their ships carried goods and ideas, not weapons. They believed the galaxy had moved beyond the age of conquest and war. They were wrong. The Drex Empire emerged from the dark regions beyond known space like a plague of metal and fire. Their black ships moved in perfect formations, each one bristling with weapons designed for one purpose: total destruction. The Drex had no interest in negotiation, surrender, or mercy. They wanted everything the Alliance had built, and they wanted everyone who built it dead. The first Alliance world to fall was Kepler-7, a mining colony with 40 million inhabitants. The Drex fleet arrived without warning, ignored all attempts at communication, and began systematically destroying every structure on the planet's surface. Within 6 hours, an entire civilization was reduced to smoking craters. The few escape pods that launched were hunted down and destroyed like insects. Commander Tala Vex watched the reports flood in from her command ship orbiting the Alliance capital world. Kepler-7 was gone. Then Kepler-9. Then the agricultural worlds of the Theta sector. Each attack followed the same pattern: overwhelming force, complete destruction, no survivors. The Drex moved through Alliance space like a wildfire, consuming everything in their path. Tala had served in the Alliance fleet for 30 years, but she had never fought a real war. None of them had. Their ships were built for exploration and peacekeeping, not battle. Their weapons were designed to disable, not destroy. When the first Alliance fleet tried to stop the Drex advance, they lasted exactly 14 minutes before being wiped out completely. The Alliance Council called an emergency meeting as reports came in that the Drex main fleet was heading directly for their capital system. Military advisors presented their options: evacuate the core worlds and retreat to the outer colonies, or make a final stand with their remaining forces. Everyone knew it was hopeless. The Drex outnumbered them 10 to 1, with ships twice as powerful and crews trained from birth for warfare. That's when Tala made the decision that would change everything. Standing before the council, she announced her intention to broadcast an open distress signal across all known frequencies. Not just to Alliance worlds, but to every civilization in the galaxy. Someone, somewhere, might have the strength to help them. The other commanders thought she had lost her mind. They pointed out that most advanced civilizations stayed neutral in conflicts, preferring to protect their own interests rather than risk their fleets for strangers. The few warrior races strong enough to challenge the Drex were either too distant or had their own territories to defend. No one was coming to save them. But Tala activated the emergency broadcast anyway. Her voice, transmitted across thousands of light years, carried a simple message: "This is Commander Tala Vex of the Vorthan Alliance. We are under attack by a force we cannot defeat. Our worlds are dying, our people are being slaughtered. If anyone can hear this transmission, if anyone has the power to help us, please respond. We have children on these worlds. They don't deserve to die like this." The message reached 17 different star systems before anyone bothered to respond. Most civilizations simply logged the transmission and continued with their daily business. A few sent polite replies expressing sympathy but explaining they could not risk their own security. The warrior races didn't even acknowledge receiving the signal. But on a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair at Luna Base, listening to something no human had ever heard before: an alien asking for help. Morrison had spent his entire career preparing for threats that never came. Earth's deep space fleet patrolled empty sectors, conducted training exercises, and waited for something to happen. Most people on Earth didn't even know the fleet existed. They certainly didn't know their tax money was funding massive warships built to fight enemies that might not even exist. Now Morrison stared at his communication screen, watching the translation software struggle to convert alien words into English. The desperation in Tala's voice came through clearly in any language. These weren't conquerors or threats, they were refugees calling for rescue. Admiral Beth Carter received Morrison's report within the hour. She read it 3 times before calling an emergency meeting with Earth's military leadership. The discussion was brief but intense. Earth had never made contact with galactic civilization. They had no treaties, no obligations, no formal relationships with any alien species. Getting involved in an interstellar war could bring the Drex to Earth's doorstep. But Carter had not spent 40 years building Earth's fleet to watch it sit idle while innocent people died. She gave Morrison his orders personally: take everything we have and go help them. The human armada that departed Earth's solar system 3 days later was smaller than anyone wanted but larger than most civilizations could field. 67 ships carrying humanity's finest warriors, scientists, and medics toward their first real test among the stars. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Thunder, watching Earth shrink behind them, knowing they might never see home again. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler Prime system, and Captain Morrison immediately knew they were too late to save the planet. The world below burned with fires visible from space, its cities reduced to glowing scars across the continents. Massive Drex warships hung in orbit like black daggers, systematically bombarding anything that still moved on the surface. But the real horror was happening in the space around the planet. Hundreds of small civilian ships, packed with alien refugees trying to escape the destruction, fled desperately toward the outer system. The Drex hunters followed them like wolves chasing sheep, destroying each transport ship with casual precision. Morrison watched through his viewscreen as a Drex destroyer fired on a refugee vessel clearly marked with medical symbols. The explosion lit up space for a brief moment, then faded, taking 3,000 innocent lives with it. "Captain, we're receiving multiple distress signals," reported Communications Officer Tony Blake, his voice tight with controlled anger. "The refugee ships are broadcasting in 17 different languages, all saying the same thing: help us." Morrison gripped his command chair as he watched another transport explode. These weren't soldiers or threats. They were families, children, elderly aliens who had never hurt anyone. And the Drex were hunting them for sport. "Signal the fleet," Morrison ordered. "Battle stations. We're going in." His tactical officer looked up from her console with concern. "Sir, our sensors are detecting over 200 Drex vessels in this system. We've got 67 ships." "I can count, Lieutenant." "Signal the fleet." The human ships spread into attack formation as they accelerated toward Kepler Prime. Their vessels looked nothing like the sleek, elegant ships used by most galactic civilizations. Human warships were built like hammers, thick armor, redundant systems, and weapons designed for prolonged fighting rather than quick decisive strikes. To alien eyes, they appeared primitive and outdated. Fleet Commander Ren Thuras of the Vorthan Alliance watched the approaching human ships from his crippled command vessel. He had never seen anything like them. Their hulls were covered in angular armor plating instead of smooth energy shields. Their weapons were mounted in crude rotating turrets rather than integrated beam arrays. Even their engine signatures looked wrong, burning chemical propellant instead of clean antimatter. "Who are these people?" asked his tactical officer. "I have no idea," Thuras replied, studying the sensor readings. "But they're heading straight into the Drex formation. They're going to be slaughtered." Thuras activated his communication system, desperately trying to reach the unknown fleet before they committed suicide. "Unknown vessels, this is Fleet Commander Ren Thuras of the Vorthan Alliance. You must retreat immediately. The Drex force is too strong. You cannot help us." Captain Morrison's image appeared on Thuras's viewscreen, and the alien commander was surprised to see a being that looked remarkably similar to his own species, except for the strange fur covering the human's head and the determined expression in his eyes. "Commander Thuras, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Fleet. We received your distress signal. We're here to help." "Earth?" Thuras had never heard of this world. "Captain, you don't understand. The Drex have over 200 warships in this system. Your fleet will be destroyed in minutes. You must save yourselves while you still can. Morrison's expression didn't change. How many refugee ships are still out there? Approximately 400 vessels with nearly 2 million civilians aboard, Thuras replied, confused by the question. But Captain, they cannot be saved. The Drex will hunt them down regardless of what we do. Then we better get to work, Morrison said simply. Before Thuras could respond, Morrison cut the transmission and immediately connected with Lieutenant Commander Luis Santos aboard the UES Valiant. Santos had spent his entire career studying alien military tactics recovered from deep space wrecks and intercepted communications. Santos, I need you to coordinate with the Alliance forces. Get me everything they know about Drex fleet movements, weapon capabilities, and tactical patterns. Already on it, Captain, Santos replied, his fingers flying over his console. The Alliance uses completely different combat doctrine than we do. They fight ship-to-ship duels instead of coordinated fleet actions. No wonder they're getting crushed. Santos established a direct link with the Alliance tactical network, and within minutes he was downloading decades of combat data. What he saw amazed him. Galactic warfare was conducted like an elaborate dance, with ships engaging in one-on-one battles according to ancient honor codes. Fleet commanders issued challenges, ships paired off against opponents of similar class, and battles were won or lost based on individual pilot skill rather than coordinated strategy. Captain, Santos reported, the Alliance has been fighting this war completely wrong. They're treating it like a tournament instead of a war. What do you mean? The Drex are using standard galactic tactics too, just more aggressively. They assign their biggest ships to fight the enemy's biggest ships, their medium ships fight medium ships, and so on. But they're not coordinating their attacks or using combined arms tactics. Each ship fights independently. Morrison smiled grimly. Then we're about to teach them something new. The Drex fleet commander noticed the approaching human ships but dismissed them as a minor threat. His sensors showed that the unknown vessels were smaller and apparently less advanced than standard Alliance warships. He assigned a squadron of destroyers to eliminate them quickly so his main force could continue hunting the refugee transports. 20 Drex warships broke formation and accelerated toward the human fleet, confident they could destroy these primitives within minutes. Their captains competed with each other to see who could score the first kill, following the traditional galactic practice of individual glory in battle. They had no idea they were about to face an enemy that fought as a pack rather than as individual hunters. Human military doctrine emphasized coordination, mutual support, and concentrated firepower. Every ship in the fleet was trained to work together, covering each other's weaknesses and combining their strengths. As the Drex destroyers approached, Captain Morrison gave a simple order that would change the course of galactic warfare forever: all ships, focus fire on the lead vessel. Pour everything we have into that one target. 67 human ships turned their weapons on a single Drex destroyer. The alien vessel's shields, designed to handle fire from one or two opponents, collapsed instantly under the concentrated bombardment. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up the entire battlefield. The remaining Drex ships suddenly found themselves facing something they had never encountered, an enemy that refused to fight fair. And Captain Morrison was just getting started. The destruction of the first Drex destroyer sent shockwaves through both fleets. Commander Thuras watched from his damaged ship as the unknown humans obliterated an enemy vessel in seconds using tactics he had never seen before. Every human ship had fired on the same target simultaneously, overwhelming its defenses through sheer concentrated firepower. The Drex fleet commander was equally stunned. In 300 years of conquest, no enemy had ever destroyed one of his ships so quickly. These primitive-looking vessels had somehow bypassed every rule of civilized warfare. But his shock quickly turned to rage. No inferior species would be allowed to humiliate the mighty Drex Empire. All ships, attack formation, the Drex commander broadcast to his fleet. Destroy these insects immediately. 180 Drex warships turned toward the human formation like a black tide of death. Their weapons charged with energy that could melt continents, and their shields glowed with power that had conquered half the galaxy. Against any normal enemy, the battle would have been over in minutes. Captain Morrison watched the massive enemy fleet approach and felt his heart racing. 67 human ships against 180 alien warships. The odds were impossible, but Morrison had not traveled across the galaxy to run away from a fight. "All ships, this is Morrison," he broadcast on the fleet channel. "Remember your training. Stay together, watch each other's backs, and make every shot count. We're not here to win glory. We're here to buy time for those refugee ships to escape." The first exchange of fire lit up space like a miniature star-going supernova. Drek's energy beams lashed out across thousands of kilometers, striking human shields with devastating force. But the humans didn't fight back the way the Dreks expected. Instead of engaging in individual ship duels, they moved as a coordinated pack, concentrating their fire on single targets while supporting each other with overlapping defensive screens. Commander Rick Palmer aboard the UES Defiance orchestrated the human defensive formation with the precision of a master conductor. Denver, moved to cover Phoenix's starboard flank. Seattle and Portland, combine shields and protect the wounded ships. Nobody fights alone out here. The human ships moved like they were connected by invisible threads. When the Dreks focused fire on one vessel, two others would immediately move to shield it while a third ship repositioned for a flanking attack. When human ships took damage, they didn't retreat to lick their wounds. Instead, they became more aggressive, using their damaged hulls as weapons. Lieutenant Amy Foster watched from her position aboard the UES Guardian as the battle raged around them. Her job was supposed to be simple: coordinate rescue operations for any human ships that got into trouble. But as she watched the refugee transport still fleeing through the outer system, she made a decision that would define the entire battle. "Captain Chen," she called to her ship's commander, "those civilian transports are still in danger. The Dreks have hunter squadrons moving to intercept them." Captain Jennifer Chen looked at her tactical display. The refugee ships were slow and defenseless, carrying millions of alien families who had already lost their homes. The Dreks hunters would slaughter them all within the hour. "Foster, plot an intercept course. We're going after those hunters." "Ma'am, that will take us away from the main battle. We won't be able to support our own fleet." "The fleet can take care of itself," Chen replied. "Those civilians can't." The Guardian broke formation along with 6 other human ships, racing toward the refugee convoy at maximum speed. It was a move that violated every rule of military tactics, splitting their forces in the face of superior numbers. But it was exactly the kind of decision that made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. Back in the main battle, the Dreks were discovering that fighting humans was unlike anything they had experienced. When a human ship's main weapons were destroyed, the crew didn't surrender. They rammed their damaged vessel into the nearest enemy ship, detonating their reactor core in a massive explosion that took both vessels with it. The UES Montana, commanded by Captain Brad Wilson, took a direct hit from a Dreks battlecruiser that shattered half her hull and killed most of her crew. Standard galactic protocol called for immediate surrender or evacuation. Instead, Captain Wilson's voice crackled over the radio, "All remaining crew, prepare for ramming speed. We're taking that battlecruiser with us." The Montana accelerated straight toward the massive Dreks vessel, her engines screaming at maximum power. The alien crew watched in disbelief as the crippled human ship slammed into their hull at nearly 10% the speed of light. The explosion created a brief new star that consumed both vessels completely. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Human ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting with weapons that shouldn't have worked and crews that refused to give up. The UES Phoenix continued firing her main guns even after her bridge was destroyed, controlled by an engineering team working from the reactor room. The UES Denver held off 4 Dreks destroyers single-handedly for over an hour, her captain coordinating the defense from a medical bay while being treated for severe injuries. The Dreks fleet commander had never seen anything like it. In his experience, enemies became demoralized and fled once they started taking heavy casualties. But these humans seemed to become more dangerous as the battle went on. Their damaged ships fought harder, their crews took greater risks, and their tactics became increasingly unpredictable. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we've lost 47 ships. The enemy has lost only 18, but they're still fighting at full effectiveness." The Drex commander studied his tactical display with growing concern. By all logic, the human fleet should have been destroyed hours ago. Instead, they had somehow managed to protect most of the refugee transports while inflicting devastating losses on his own forces. His ships were designed for quick, decisive victories, not prolonged battles against enemies who refused to follow the rules. Hours passed. The battle became a grinding war of attrition as human ships used every trick they knew to stay alive. They fired from behind destroyed hulks, used debris fields for cover, and coordinated attacks with a precision that seemed impossible given their losses. Lieutenant Foster and her rescue squadron had successfully escorted the refugee convoy to the edge of the system, fighting off 3 separate Drex hunter groups in the process. Now they were racing back to rejoin the main battle, their ships scarred but their crews determined. "Captain Morrison," Foster broadcast as they approached the battle zone, "civilian evacuation complete. All refugee transports are clear of the system. We're coming to help finish this." Morrison smiled grimly as he watched Foster's ships tear into the Drex rear guard. His own vessel, the Thunder, had taken so much damage that half her systems were offline, but her weapons still worked and her crew still fought. "All ships, final push," Morrison ordered. "Let's show these Drex what happens when you pick on innocent people." The human fleet, reinforced by Foster's returning squadron, pressed their attack with renewed fury. They had accomplished their primary mission of saving the refugees, but now they wanted something more. They wanted the Drex to remember this day and fear it. After 14 hours of continuous combat, the Drex fleet commander finally admitted the unthinkable: he was losing. His mighty armada had been reduced to less than 90 functional ships by an enemy force that should have been destroyed in the opening minutes of the battle. "All ships, retreat," he ordered, his voice hollow with defeat. "Fall back to rally point 7. As the surviving Drex vessels fled the system, Captain Morrison slumped in his command chair, exhausted but victorious. Around him, the bridge crew cheered weakly, too tired for proper celebration. The impossible had happened. 67 human ships had defeated 180 Drex warships in open battle. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. The silence after battle was almost worse than the fighting itself. Where moments before space had blazed with weapons fire and explosions, now there was only the cold emptiness between stars and the slowly spinning wreckage of destroyed ships. Captain Morrison sat in his command chair, bleeding from a head wound he barely remembered receiving, and tried to process what they had accomplished. The tactical display told the story in harsh numbers. 29 human ships completely destroyed. 31 others so badly damaged they could barely maintain life support. Out of the 14,000 crew members who had left Earth's solar system, over 8,000 would never see home again. The price of victory had been written in human blood. "Captain," Communications Officer Tony Blake's voice was hoarse from smoke inhalation, "we're receiving status reports from all surviving vessels. The Drex are gone, but we've got crews trapped in damaged sections throughout the fleet." Morrison nodded slowly, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a lead blanket. Every name on that casualty list was someone he knew, someone who had trusted him to bring them through this fight alive. He had failed too many of them. "Begin search and rescue operations immediately," he ordered. "Every ship that can move starts looking for survivors. I don't care if they're human or alien, we get them out." Commander Renthuras watched the human rescue operations from his own crippled vessel with growing amazement. In galactic warfare, victorious fleets typically secured their own forces first, then dealt with enemy wounded if they had time. But the humans were doing something completely different. The UES Denver, her hull cracked open like an egg and her engines dead, was using her remaining power to coordinate rescue beams toward both human and Vorthan survivors floating in the debris field. Her crew worked alongside Thuris's own people, sharing breathing equipment and medical supplies without any regard for species differences. "Commander," his communications officer reported, "the humans are requesting permission to send medical teams to assist our wounded. They're offering to share their emergency supplies." Thuris stared at the report in disbelief. The human fleet had just suffered devastating casualties, yet they were offering to help their former enemies. It made no tactical sense, violated every principle of military self-preservation, and was perhaps the most noble gesture he had ever witnessed. "Grant permission immediately," Thuris replied. "And transmit our own medical data to assist their rescue operations." Major Danny Bradley led the first joint rescue team through the twisted wreckage of the Alliance cruiser Starlight, his human marines working alongside Vorthan soldiers to search for survivors. The ship's hull had been breached in dozens of places, and the artificial gravity failed intermittently, sending rescue teams floating in unexpected directions. "Over here," called Sergeant Kevin Walsh, his voice muffled by his environmental suit. "I've got life signs in this section, but the blast door is jammed." A Vorthan engineer named Kell worked beside Walsh, their 4 arms allowing him to manipulate tools with precision no human could match. Together, they cut through the twisted metal that trapped 3 injured Alliance crew members in what had once been a medical bay. "Easy now," Bradley said as they pulled the survivors free. "We're getting you out of here." One of the rescued aliens, a young Vorthan barely out of training, looked up at Bradley with eyes full of confusion. "Why are you helping us? We're not your people." Bradley paused in his work, considering the question. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "That's enough." Dr. Janet Murphy had set up a field hospital aboard the UES Guardian, the ship's cargo bay converted into a massive medical facility. Human and alien wounded lay side by side on emergency stretchers, receiving treatment from an integrated medical team that included doctors from 3 different species. Murphy worked alongside Dr. Velk, a Vorthan physician whose knowledge of alien biology was saving human lives, while Murphy's trauma surgery techniques were keeping alien patients alive. They had been working for 18 straight hours, moving from patient to patient without regard for exhaustion. "Dr. Murphy," called medic Ray Collins, "we've got a critical case coming in. Human pilot with severe burns and multiple fractures." Murphy looked up from the Vorthan officer she was treating, her hands covered in alien blood that glowed faintly blue under the medical lights. "Transfer my patient to Dr. Velk and prep the surgical bay. Time. 3 minutes out. I'll be ready." She turned to her alien colleague. "Dr. Velk, can you handle the thoracic repair?" "With pleasure, Dr. Murphy. Your surgical techniques are most impressive." Captain Morrison finally allowed himself to be treated after personally confirming that all rescue operations were proceeding smoothly. He sat in the medical bay while a human medic cleaned a gash on his forehead, but his attention was focused on the communication console showing status reports from throughout the fleet. "Captain," Tony Blake approached with a data pad, "Commander Thuris is requesting a meeting with all surviving human commanders. Says he has something important to discuss." Morrison stood up, ignoring the medic's protests about incomplete treatment. "Tell him we'll meet aboard his flagship as soon as our rescue operations are complete." The meeting took place 12 hours later in what remained of the Alliance Command ship's conference room. The walls were scorched from battle damage, and temporary lights cast harsh shadows across the faces of the survivors. Morrison sat at the table alongside his surviving captains, facing a group of alien commanders who looked at them with expressions ranging from awe to bewilderment. Commander Thuris spoke first, his voice carrying a weight of emotion that transcended species barriers. "Captain Morrison, what your people have done here today defies everything we thought we knew about warfare and honor. You came to our aid when no one else would. You fought against impossible odds to save people you had never met. And when the battle was won, you treated our wounded as if they were your own family." Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "You sent a distress signal. We responded. That's what civilized people do. No, Thuras replied firmly. That is what humans do. In 300 years of galactic civilization, no species has ever demonstrated such selfless courage. We called for help, and you came across the galaxy to answer. You asked for nothing in return except the chance to save innocent lives. The alien commander activated a recording device, and Morrison's own voice filled the room. You called for help, we came. It was something he had said during the rescue operations, a simple statement he barely remembered making. This recording has already been transmitted to every Alliance world, Thuras continued. Within days, it will reach every civilization in known space. What happened at Kepler Prime will be remembered for 1,000 years. Morrison looked around the table at his fellow captains. They were tired, wounded, and mourning their dead, but there was something else in their expressions, pride. They had answered the call for help, and they had made a difference. Commander Thuras, Morrison said quietly, we lost a lot of good people today. They died so that your people could live. All we ask is that you remember them, and that you help us make sure their sacrifice meant something. Thuras stood and formally saluted in the human style, followed by every alien officer in the room. Captain Morrison, humanity has earned the eternal gratitude of the Vorthan Alliance. What you have given us can never be repaid, but it will never be forgotten. As news of the Battle of Kepler Prime spread across the galaxy, something fundamental shifted in how the universe viewed the small blue planet called Earth. Humanity was no longer an unknown species on the fringes of civilization. They were the people who answered when others called for help. 3 weeks after the Battle of Kepler Prime, Commander Thuras stood before the emergency session of the Vorthan Alliance Council, still struggling to find words that could capture what humanity had done for them. The council chamber, normally filled with careful diplomatic discussions, buzzed with an energy he had never felt before. Honorable council members, Thuras began, I stand before you today because of the actions of a species we had never heard of until they answered our desperate call for help. The humans not only saved our people, they changed everything we thought we knew about warfare, honor, and sacrifice. The recordings from Kepler Prime played on the chamber's main display. Council members watched in silence as human ships threw themselves against overwhelming odds, as human medical teams treated alien wounded with the same care they gave their own people, as Captain Morrison simply stated, you called for help, we came. Council leader Vashti, eldest of the Vorthan people, spoke with a voice that carried the weight of centuries. Commander Thuras, what you are proposing is unprecedented. Full membership in our alliance has never been offered to a species we have just met. The humans know nothing of our customs, our trade agreements, our complex diplomatic relationships. With respect, honored leader, Thuras replied, they know the only thing that truly matters. They know how to help when help is needed. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Every council member had seen the recordings. Every one of them understood that humanity had saved their civilization when no one else would even try. The vote was unanimous, full membership, access to all Alliance technology, and established trade routes across 6 star systems. The formal invitation was transmitted to Earth with great ceremony, along with detailed proposals for technological exchange, economic partnerships, and mutual defense treaties. Council leader Vashti personally recorded the message, offering humanity everything the Alliance could provide in gratitude for their heroic actions. Admiral Beth Carter received the transmission at Earth Defense Command Headquarters, and her response surprised everyone who heard it. Instead of the eager acceptance most species would have given, Carter's reply was measured and thoughtful. Commander Thuras and honored members of the Vorthan Alliance, Carter said, looking directly into the camera, humanity is deeply honored by your generous offer. We accept your friendship gladly and look forward to learning from your wisdom and experience. However, we must respectfully decline any special privileges or advanced technology gifts. The pause in her message seemed to stretch across the light years between Earth and Vorthan space. What we seek is not advantage, but partnership. We offer our friendship freely, our protection when needed, and our cooperation in building a more peaceful galaxy. In return, we ask only for mutual defense agreements and the right to establish diplomatic relations. We believe that trust must be earned through actions, not given through gifts. When Thuras received Carter's response, he played it 3 times before he could fully process what he was hearing. In his experience, newly contacted species either demanded immediate access to advanced technology or offered submission in exchange for protection. Humanity was doing neither. Colonel Robert Murphy arrived at Vorthan Prime 6 weeks later aboard the newly commissioned UES Diplomat, becoming Earth's first official ambassador to an alien civilization. Murphy had spent his career in military intelligence, but nothing had prepared him for the overwhelming reception he received. Thousands of Vorthan citizens lined the spaceport corridors as Murphy walked toward the embassy building that had been constructed specifically for human use. They held signs written in carefully practiced English, "Thank you Earth, heroes of Kepler Prime," and "Welcome friends." Murphy paused at the embassy entrance, overwhelmed by the genuine gratitude in alien faces that had learned to smile in the human manner just to welcome him. A young Vorthan child, no more than 10 years old by human standards, approached with a small bouquet of flowers from her world. "Thank you for saving my grandmother," she said in halting English, offering the flowers with 4 small hands. Murphy knelt down and accepted the gift, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "You're welcome, little one. That's what friends do for each other." Word of humanity's actions at Kepler Prime spread through the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within days of the first news reports, Earth's communication arrays were receiving messages from species they had never heard of. Within weeks, 12 different civilizations had sent formal diplomatic envoys to Earth, each seeking the same thing the Vorthan Alliance had found: allies who would actually help when help was needed. The Kelthani Republic, survivors of their own war against the Drex Empire decades earlier, offered mutual defense agreements and shared intelligence about Drex tactical weaknesses. The Zephyrian Collective, masters of advanced engineering, proposed joint research projects aimed at improving humanitarian technologies. Even the proud Targonian Empire, known for their military traditions, sent ambassadors seeking friendship with the warrior healers of Earth. Each new alliance brought the same pattern: other species offered technology, resources, or territory in exchange for human protection. Each time, humanity's response remained the same. They wanted partnership, not dominance. They sought cooperation, not tribute. Meanwhile, across Drex-controlled space, something unprecedented was happening. News of the Drex defeat at Kepler Prime had reached the subjugated worlds that had lived under the Empire's brutal rule for generations. For the first time in centuries, these oppressed peoples had proof that the mighty Drex fleet could be defeated. Rebellions erupted simultaneously on 17 different worlds. The Kaulos mining colonies, enslaved for over 2 centuries, overwhelmed their Drex overseers and declared independence. The agricultural worlds of the Theta sector formed their own defensive alliance, refusing to send tribute ships to the Empire. Even some Drex military commanders began questioning orders, wondering if their empire was truly as invincible as they had been taught. The Drex Emperor, faced with internal collapse and external threats, made a decision that would have been unthinkable before Kepler Prime. He sent secret envoys to Earth, seeking negotiations rather than continued warfare. Captain Morrison, now promoted to admiral and given command of Earth's rapidly expanding deep space fleet, established his headquarters on Luna Base. The facility, once a quiet outpost monitoring empty space, had become the center of galactic diplomacy and military coordination. Morrison stood in his new office, looking out at Earth through the transparent aluminum windows, and marveled at how quickly everything had changed. 6 months ago, humanity had been alone in the galaxy. Now, they were at the center of the largest mutual defense alliance in known space. His aide, Commander Patricia Wells, entered with the daily briefing. "Admiral, we have 3 new requests for assistance this week. The Andromedan colonies are reporting pirate attacks, the Centauri trade routes need escort protection, and the Vega system has asked for help establishing their own defense fleet." Morrison nodded, studying the star charts that now covered most of his office walls. Each pin represented a world that had asked Earth for help, and each colored line showed the growing network of alliances and mutual defense agreements spreading across the galaxy. What's our fleet status, Commander? We now have 47 ships operational, with 12 more under construction. The Vorthan Alliance has offered to help speed up production, and the Targonians want to share their armor technology. Morrison smiled, remembering his conversation with Admiral Carter about humanity's new role in the galaxy. They had not sought to become the galaxy's protectors, but somehow that's exactly what had happened. Every species that joined their growing alliance brought the same request: help us, and we'll help others in return. The Galactic Defense Initiative, as the news media had started calling it, was becoming something entirely new in the history of spacefaring civilization. Not an empire built on conquest, not a federation bound by economics, but a voluntary alliance of worlds united by a simple principle: when someone calls for help, you answer. Admiral Morrison activated his communication console and began recording the weekly status report that would be broadcast to every member world of the growing alliance. This is Admiral Jake Morrison, reporting from Galactic Defense Initiative headquarters. This week, our combined fleet successfully escorted 17 refugee convoys to safety, prevented 4 separate pirate attacks, and helped establish defensive capabilities for 3 newly independent worlds. No distress calls went unanswered. As he finished the recording, Morrison looked out at the stars and thought about the young captain who had first answered an alien distress signal. That decision had changed everything, not just for humanity, but for every peaceful species in the galaxy. They had become exactly what the universe needed: people who showed up when others needed help, who fought when fighting was necessary, and who offered friendship without asking for anything in return. The galaxy would never be the same again, and that was exactly how humanity wanted it.